Hello, everyone. Welcome to the International Mentoring Community, All Things Mentoring Lounge. And this is the place to learn, explore, discover, and even have a conversation with us about mentoring. And today we're going to be taking a look at what does it mean to set up a mentoring for the workplace program. Take a look at a Quora question or two. And I just have something to share with you about some research that I'm doing. And I'd like to bring you into that. So, by way of introduction, my name is Dr. Stephen Hobbs. I am the Director of Certification for IMC, International Mentoring Community. And with me, my co host is.
My name is Doug Lawrence, and I'm the Director of Education and Outreach for the International Mentoring Community.
And it's wonderful to be with you on this day. And again, just to remind you to subscribe and ring the bell so you can get notifications. And with that, I think what I'm going to do, Doug, is I'm just going to start here with a little bit of an update about some of the things that I'm up to and how it links to mentoring. And then why don't we take a look at your Quora question?
Okay. Yeah.
And did you have two today or one?
I have two.
Okay, well, why don't we see maybe later we'll get one in, and if there's time for the second one, we'll do that because we got a pretty jam-packed show today. So let's see what unfolds. Is that okay?
Yep, that works for me.
All righty. So just to start off with, one of the things that I am doing is I'm looking at researching the connection between those who are 55 years young professionals who are looking at transition. And I'm looking at how to help them to become a mentor while they are looking at that transition and maybe saying, how might I mentor in the workplace before I leave? Or can I pick up mentoring as a skill that I might be able to use to share my lived experience when I've gone through my transition into my next 50. So I'm doing a bit of research around that. But one of the key areas to go with that is those who are 55 plus years young professionals who are also grandparents. And what might that mean to bring this mentoring story into their relationship with their grandkids and working on eco-related projects, legacy projects with them? So it's kind of an interesting play. Mentoring as being a very important, let's call it transition skill to become an educator using a mentoring as a way in which to do that. And if that's of interest, you can write a note in the comments section that you'd like to learn more, and I can certainly get back to you about that. But it's a lot of fun. And yesterday, I was talking to someone, and if I was to use the analogy, they took the frozen pink wild-caught salmon out of their holster and whacked me up the side of the head about something that I wasn't doing in relation to this. And I so appreciate that. Not so much by being whacked, but taking the time to give me some insights that are proven to be quite valuable. And that's the beauty of research, right? And Doug does it in the mental health area and connecting mentoring, and we share a lot about that, and he wrote a book about that. So just to emphasize, we are doing some research, deep connective research, and it's fun for both of us. So maybe why don't we transfer over into a Quora question? And again, people don't know who Doug is. Doug is a deep practitioner, inspired practitioner of mentoring, and his answers to the Quora questions are always quite insightful. So the question is, and your response, Doug, for today?
So the question is, I want a mentor to tell me what I need to become rich and famous. And surprisingly enough, that's a popular question.
Oh, there you go. There you go. So your response was?
So my response focused on what is the role of a mentor. And so to do so, I used the definition of mentoring, so the two-way trusted relationship where both the mentor and mentee are going to learn and grow together on a personal and professional basis. So it's understanding what the role actually is, and not looking at it from the aspect that it's something else. It's definitely not waving that magic fairy wand or throwing fairy dust or anything like that, and tomorrow you're going to be rich and famous. There's a lot of work that needs to happen, and the mentor is going to help you to be able to do that. The other part that I had included in my response was becoming rich and famous may be a dream, and that we may want to stand in front of the mirror in the morning and ask ourselves, is that really who I want to be? And if it is, then where am I today and where do I need to be tomorrow in order to achieve that, if it's even something that's achievable? And the other part, or the other point that I had surfaced, was this may not be something that a mentor is going to be the best solution for you. You may want to take a look at someone who is a coach that can take you through their process to be able to help you realize whether or not rich and famous is even in the cards for you. So that was my response to that particular question.
And it's great that you mentioned about the coach. Maybe it's not a mentor, you may need a coach, because next week, on the next week, All Things Mentoring Lounge, we're going to take a look at coaching and mentoring and coaching. And what's their connection? What's their competition? What's their collaboration? And so that's great. Well, I think what we can do, Doug, is, because we've got quite a few things to share around the story of setting up a mentoring for the workplace, and you notice I'm emphasizing for. We've got 5 really great points that we want to share with you today. And if you wish, jump in with comments or questions, and we'll see them on the screen, and we can weave those in and sort of enjoy the conversation. It doesn't always have to be Doug and I presenting. So to get us started, you'll notice that I'm using, I'm emphasizing a word, mentoring for the workplace. And I'm doing that purposefully because there's an often used phrase, which is about mentoring in the workplace. And over the time that Doug and I have been together, and before that, I kept always looking at the use of words and their meaning and how they apply to mentoring. And once I got having a conversation with Doug, one of the things that we were doing is emphasizing this in and for. And the way that we look at it is mentoring for the workplace is really the emphasis on for the persons involved in the workplace, more of a social, cultural lens that you're looking at, whereas mentoring in the workplace is bringing the tools and techniques, right, to the workplace for use. So you might think more about the technology, the software that you're using. And Doug makes a really good example of this. He talks about was it 25 pairs when you're into 25 pairs, Doug, isn't it? That you might want to start looking at technology, or what was it?
It was 90.
90 pairs. Okay. All right. So the notion being is that as you start pairing up people and keeping track of it in terms of tracking the mentoring arrangements, then technology would be of great use, right? From an HR perspective, the manager's perspective is using it. But for the most part, Doug and I are really sharing more about this mentoring for the workplace, the social, cultural look at the importance of mentoring, this two-way trusted relationship for personal and professional development, and interacting with each other a little bit over the longer term versus the shorter term. Not to say mentoring can't have a short-term aspect to it, but usually it has a little bit of a longer term, especially when we're talking about workplace situations. Okay. Is there anything you want to add to that distinction so that when people are listening, they're listening through that social cultural lens? Anything you want to add, Doug?
The only thing I would add to that is, just to reinforce the degree of effort, time and effort that's required to do the physical matching, that that's why they have technology out there, so that that can speed up that process. But there's also other things. So you need to really truly understand with your mentoring program, you need to understand what are the requirements for all of that. And and in doing so, that's also going to help reinforce your business case for acquiring the technology.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things, and I'm typing some little notes and reminders here as we go. Uh, if you come at it from a mentoring in the workplace and saying, okay, we'll bring a technology, let's go find that technology that's going to work before you even have had conversations and people experiencing mentoring, that could sort of sometimes backfire on you. More times, not sometimes, more times actually backfire on you. And that's why I think Doug and I would certainly encourage more about this for the workplace approach. And I think that that's a great segue into, uh, in setting this up, a language that I would use would be as setting up the platform of it, the social cultural platform that you can then add technology later if you need to. But the notion of platform that I'm referring to here is the sense of what you stand on. So it could be the sense of the values, the vision, the where you're wanting to go with mentoring, and being able to make a distinction between mentoring and coaching. And is there a coaching component that comes with that? Or do you need to create a coaching platform? Or do you want to create it as a mentoring and coaching platform? These are things that you have to think through, because the platform gives you something to stand on. And also those who are going to engage with you, something to stand on, right? If you're sort of walking around sort of a murky, swampy area and your feet are sinking and you're slogging through, it's not as great as if you have a walkway, right, to move through that swampy kind of thing. And sometimes when you start up a new program, it feels a little swampy-ish. Which way are we going, right? We haven't drained the swamp, so to speak, and those kind of things. So how do you build up that platform, that walkway, to give people something to stand on? Which means then the next component of is the program itself and setting it up, and how do people access this program, the communication that the program exists in the first place, and to be able to bring the key elements of that platform around, the values and the vision and where you're going with it to set up the program. And there's not sort of a one size fits all mentoring program. I think we've got to acknowledge that. And some of the points we'll make next, I think, will add to that. But I know that the program itself is, you've got to put a little bit of time, effort into it, and to figure out where you're going. And to do that, I would encourage you, if you're organizing it, to get the participants involved, whether they're the mentor or the mentee. Ask them what they require and request for the program. Don't assume that and then put it out there and say that, this is how we're going to do it, because it might feel a little bit more like something that's put over them rather than something that they're working with together. And just to round out this notion of what else is possible, then there's three other ways of adding to it, three other P's, and that would be project, process, and product. So very quickly, projects is maybe there's a new project that you want to work on and you need some mentoring done, and it might have a start and end date, and it's very clear about what you need to do. The process might be as what other processes are going to add to help out. So maybe someone needs to learn more about creativity, innovation, someone ethical decision making, someone responsive listening, these kind of processes to add to it. And then the products is, do you have things to read, handouts to read, recommend good books, these kind of ideas for people to work with. So when you build that platform, there's the program, the projects, the processes, and the products that are there to help you get this launched and up and running. Before we move into your point, anything to add to that? Because Doug's got a really important segue point here. Anything to add to the P's?
I think the one thing before I lose it is the aspect of with implementing mentoring programs in an organization is the aspect of having the leadership people in the organization understand, answering the question, what's the business problem that you're trying to solve by implementing mentoring in your organization? And then you've already touched on the aspect of customizing the program to meet the needs of the organization. I've seen so many times where large service providers that provide mentoring solutions come in without even taking a look, and they kind of just say, our program, we can implement it no matter where we go. Yes, you can, but it doesn't meet the needs. And I've seen where it hasn't met the needs, and they've had to bring somebody else in to kind of clean up things. So those were two things I wanted to get out there before we moved on.
Yeah, and it's great connectors and adding to it, right? And I'm just reminding, I'm writing a few other notes in as we go along. But there's a really important segue point here that Doug's going to share with you based on his own consulting work with organizations who are bringing this mentoring in the workplace. So Doug, you want to share that point?
Well, there are 4 factors is probably the best way to ensure success. And those are, first off, corporate support. So does the organization right from the very top, do they support mentoring in the organization? Are they willing to allow employees to mentor on company time, on corporate time? Or is the expectation that they're going to have to do it outside of that? So number 1, corporate support. Number 2 is structure. When you've designed your program, have you put some structure around it so that people understand roles, responsibilities, frequency of meetings, all of those things, and how we're going to be able to determine a return on investment by investing in mentoring? How is that all going to be taking place? And the third thing, and sometimes I like to say this is probably the most important, is training being provided as part of the implementation of your program. And training can be, in simplistic terms, can be as much as, a 2-hour workshop. It can be a half-day workshop. It can be a 1-day. It can be a whole week of training. But you do need to give some sort of training. Don't throw people into the deep end of the pool without any training, without a life preserver, or without any training. And finally, the last point is, will your organization's culture, will it support mentoring? And you'd be surprised, for those of you listening in today, you'd be surprised at how many organizations haven't determined whether or not they are even ready today to implement mentoring, and what would that look like, and what would be the outcomes.
So let's just go over those factors again. The first one was support.
Corporate support, yeah.
Yeah, the next one was?
Structure.
And the next one?
Is training.
And the last one?
Culture.
Right. So when we take a look at these success factors in mentoring for the workplace, do you have an actual working example of where one or more of these actually tanked out and sort of put a real big dent into a mentoring for the workplace program?
I had an organization that didn't the solution provider, when they implemented mentoring, did not customize the program to the organization. So as a result of that, the training that ended up being provided didn't meet the needs of the organization, and they had to bring someone else in who took the time to understand, to understand what the needs were and to develop the training, and then to go through and implement the training. And the solution, from what I recall, was fairly simplistic. It was, all it required was a very targeted, focused approach on what they needed to know in order to mentor within that organization, and it was done through some lunchtime webinars and a recording of the training session so that it could be popped up on their website and people could access it at any time. So it was continuous learning.
Yeah, and if I could add an example to that, it sort of combines the support and structure. I was setting up a program, and it was around leadership and management. And I said, well, what kind of mentoring and coaching are we going to put with this? And the senior group said, well, we might do a little bit of coaching. I said, well, what about the mentoring aspect? Because there's a lot of you who are sitting here helping me to design this program, and I know I'm going to meet with some of the managers and leaders. Would you like to offer some mentoring to them about, what's happening because you're helping to design this? And I got this total blank look went right across their faces. Mentoring? No, we'll hire some coaches to do that. Well, and one person finally piped up and said, well, look, we're so busy. We know it's there. That's why we'll get the coaches in to help you. And I said, I'm going to call a timeout here, or an audible. I think I used the word audible, right? I was thinking football at the time. Do an audible here. And I said, if you do that, then you are going to weaken what it is that you say you would like from those who are going to be using this leading and managing. Even if all you did was and I'm going to ask Doug to talk about formal and informal after we've done this, is even from an informal point of view, that you made yourself available to have a conversation if someone wanted to have a conversation. You didn't necessarily want to do it like every week or something like that, but if someone reached out to you, and what was really interesting is the CEO all of a sudden went, oh, hang on a minute, I see where you're going. I think what I'll do is I'm going to come to the lunch, all right, of the first day of the course, and every time I can, or I'll send someone else, and we're going to come and we're going to talk about why is it important that we're doing this management leading point of view, and I'll share a mentoring story at that point in time. And I went, at least that's a start, right? And it made a really big difference to that management leadership course, that the person came in. And I do know that I think it was 5 people. Well, all of them, there was 21 people in each course, and I got 18 of 21 most times would do a couple hour coaching sessions with me. But I think it was between 3 or 5 per course, and I did about 20 courses. They would go and get some mentoring, right? But they didn't make big efforts as those in the course to go, and which could have been, a bit of the culture aspect. There may not have been the quite flow there. So I saw it happen, right? And I did what I could, and that was one of my first times of learning. I got to push this a little bit more. I got to get this mentoring for the workplace in there, and not let it sort of be something on the side of the desk, so to speak. So that was one that I thought that I would add for those who are living in that sense. So I think what would be important, Doug, is, do you want to share a little bit about formal, informal when it applies to the platform program?
Yeah, I certainly can do that. Excuse me. The best way for me to break it down for our listeners is that in the case of formal mentoring, the program manager or whoever is doing the matching will actually physically match a mentor with a mentee. In informal mentoring, that's more of a culture in the organization where I'm not physically assigned a mentee to work with, but I do know that there could be people coming from within the organization to ask for guidance and support. And it can come from the same area I'm in, it can come from a different area, it can anywhere in the organization. And the idea behind it is that how I typically describe it is I know that when I wake up in the morning in an informal mentoring situation, when I wake up in the morning, I know that I'm going to learn something from Stephen, and Stephen's going to learn something from me, and we both may learn something from Sally and Bob, and it just happens as part of our day-to-day stuff that takes place. And where the challenge or sometimes the trick is that the organization's culture has to be open to be flexible and willing to kind of that continuous learning, right? It's learning on the go. And that, if somebody comes up to me and says, I see what you're working on. I wonder what would happen if we were to do this, this, or this. And so now we've kind of planted the seed and we've got that employee thinking about different ways that they may be able to resolve that situation or change what they're doing. And you'll end up having those informal conversations that will help with the whole mentoring process and get much the same results, if not more, than you would from a formal mentoring process.
I'm going to use an example and let me know if this works for you, okay? But when I think of the formal aspect, I think about the lines and boxes on the organization chart. And when I think of informal, it's more about the white space of the organization chart. I'm hoping people get, I'm not saying it's that disconnect, because you can do a little bit of both. But just to give a sense of formal, informal, what do you think of that analogy, that metaphor?
It's good. It's really good.
Yeah. So formal mentoring has a little bit more lines and boxes, so that it's actually pertaining to, what's the scope and what it is that you're doing, and learn from someone. The other one is, you're tapping into that white space. And to your point, you might find someone in a completely different area, but you can learn something from them, and you ask to get involved from a mentoring point of view, right? And so I just thought I'd use that imagery to make that sort of connection between those two. So came to mind. I just thought I'd share it. So yeah,
I'm glad you did.
Yeah. So I think there's a couple of other really important points, right? Because we could go into the details around mentoring but I think that's not what we want to do in the show here today. But I know there's one solid point that I would like to make about mentoring for the workplace, and Doug has one himself. So, Doug, I'm just going to go first, okay, and just share the one that I have. At the beginning of the show, I talked a little about the 55 plus year old who's in transition, looking at life career transition. And that's what I'm researching. So this mentoring in the workplace program, think about it from this perspective, is the support that can be given to someone who is looking about transitioning away from the workplace or transitioning to another aspect of the workplace. How might learning and practicing mentoring be of assistance to that person? And there's two ways of looking at it. One lens would be is to share their lived experience within the workplace before they move along and away from that workplace. And I'm thinking about how important it is to look at mentoring for the workplace, because it was something that I call jumping the experience queue. There are those in the workplace who might pick up a phone and look for the how-to, do the how-to, but not really know the why. The how-to is the lines and boxes, but they don't have the white space understanding, and that's where a mentor can support them. And therefore, how might you help that person become that mentor? And then when they've done the transition, how might they use mentoring as a way in which to collect together their lived experience and be able to then say, well, look, I can offer this informal, formal program. I could do free, paid. There's lots of ways in which they can then figure out how they want to take their portfolio of lived experience and to be able to share it. There's a group that I'm getting involved with now, and I propose for them to look at this sort of elder mentor pathway related to eco nature-based related projects. And sometimes the story of the planet has a young person's attachment to it. Those who are older, elder kind of thing, are not necessarily jumping in. So how might we use mentoring to make connections there? And that's what I'm bringing forward. And so it's something to think about. A mentoring for the workplace program can support what's going on and or help people to do life and career transition. So there's lots of benefits here in looking at mentoring for the workplace. Doug, you want to share the one that's near you?
And it feeds off of the transitioning piece from, certainly from a career perspective. I think of some of the military service people that I work with who are transitioning from service life to civilian life. And what's one of the things that, excuse me, that is part of that journey is the aspect of their mental health. And a lot of organizations today have not addressed how they're going to support individuals who are dealing with mental health challenges, which can be, stress, anxiety, depression. There's quite a long list of things that fall into that category. But the big thing is that mentoring can and will be part of a support structure for mental health, and organizations need to embrace that now and sort of be the leaders in moving forward with mentoring as part of their support structure, rather than always kind of be bringing up the rear and sort of going, well, I wish we would have thought of that and stuff like that. So yeah, it would be, for me, it is a passion of mine. It is definitely the whole aspect of, that transition piece, but also plugging mentoring into that, but also just from a mental health as a whole, is making sure that we understand that there is a place for mentoring as part of that support structure.
Yeah, and I think that what both of us are bringing up here is that mentoring for the workplace, that platform program, figuring out what needs to happen with it. That's why we use that social cultural lens for. And then you can take a look at this mentoring in the workplace, and you can talk about what do we bring in support of it, the technology and that. But if you don't set it up from a person's point of view, don't help to create the relationship to the structure, rather than just setting up a structure and then putting people into it, you're doing a bit of a disservice for reasons like what we've just given: mental health, that life and career transition, and helping people in this notion of their movement while in the organization or upon leaving the organization. So let us know in the comments section if we're making a case here for mentoring for the workplace and that it makes sense to you. And you might be watching this later, so please add away. Again, I've been typing in some of the key phrases and that to spark some understanding, or to see if there's something you want to comment on. And I think we're getting Doug to a time where we're going to need to close off here. So I just remind people, hey, listen, please subscribe and comment, like, and share. And Doug and I both appreciate that, so we can continue what we're doing here. Again, live All Things Mentoring happens on Wednesdays at 10 a.m. Mountain. And come and join us for conversations. We like to think of them as collaborative conversations. But Doug and I are having a collaborative conversation where we can here, but we would certainly encourage you to get involved as well. So like all shows that we've been doing up until now, Doug, you get the last words that will help us close off today's show. So your thoughts?
Make mentoring part of your support structure.
So with that, folks, again, if we can be of assistance with your mentoring for the workplace platform and program, you know how to get a hold of us. Take care, everyone.
Take care.